Picture yourselves treading water off the coast when a massive pod of wild dolphins suddenly swarms your group, violently thrashing the surface into an inescapable ring. You assume this is an aggressive territorial display, right until someone looks down and spots a great white shark lurking beneath your feet. The truly unsettling reality is that this exact phenomenon of dangerous animals forming a living shield for completely helpless humans happens everywhere, from open oceans to local zoos. The real mystery we need to unravel is why a wild creature would ever bother risking its own life. In 2004, 4 lifeguards were swimming off the coast of New Zealand when a pod of bottlenose dolphins suddenly swarmed them. The lifeguards initially thought the dolphins were just being playful, perhaps a little aggressive, as the animals began frantically swimming in a tight, impenetrable circle around the group, while violently slapping their tails against the water's surface. The humans were actually getting frustrated by what felt like deliberate harassment, right up until one of them dove beneath the surface and saw a 10-foot great white shark aggressively pacing just below their dangling feet. The dolphins held that exact defensive perimeter for 40 agonizing minutes, acting as a relentless living barrier until the shark finally lost interest and swam away into the deep. The underlying truth here gets genuinely fascinating when you strip away the heartwarming Hollywood narrative and start viewing this incident as a strict biological algorithm. These dolphins were not making a conscious moral decision to save human lives out of some profound sense of interspecies solidarity. According to marine neurobiologist Dr. Lori Marino and extensively documented research in marine mammal science, this behavior is a hardwired evolutionary protocol known as a pod defense mechanism. Dolphins possess an incredibly powerful, ancient instinct to execute a mobbing strategy whenever they detect a predator threatening the vulnerable offspring or injured members of their group. When those bottlenose dolphins saw a cluster of large, clumsy mammals thrashing helplessly in the water with a great white shark approaching, their evolutionary programming simply hijacked their conscious behavior. They categorized the lifeguards not as beloved human friends, but as incredibly uncoordinated temporary pod members that triggered their internal alarm system. The dolphins were just executing millions of years of survival coding that commands them to circle up and intimidate the predator whenever a vulnerable mammal happens to be in the strike zone. They did not nominate themselves as aquatic heroes saving the day. They were simply biological machines reacting to a specific set of environmental triggers, running an ancient threat response software that just happened to catch a few lucky humans in its protective net. Now let us look at something genuinely wild that happened on dry land, right in the middle of a typical American suburb. In 1996, the Brookfield Zoo just outside Chicago became the site of a terrifying incident when a 3-year-old boy slipped and fell nearly 20 feet directly into the primate enclosure. He hit the concrete floor and lay completely unconscious as the crowd above erupted into absolute panic. A massive female western lowland gorilla named Binti, weighing well over 200 pounds, immediately approached the motionless child. Everyone watching fully expected a brutal, bloody tragedy to unfold right before their eyes. Except, instead of attacking or treating the boy as an invader, Binti gently scooped him up, cradled him carefully against her chest, just like a human mother would, growled aggressively to warn away the other curious gorillas, and safely carried him straight to the enclosure door where zookeepers were waiting. It looks like a profound moral choice, a beautiful moment of interspecies compassion that proves animals possess a deep, philosophical sense of right and wrong. But the clinical reality driving this breathtaking behavior is actually a massive biochemical misfire, known to researchers as misdirected maternal instinct. Dr. Franz de Waal, a leading primatologist who published extensive research on this phenomenon in his 2009 work regarding cross-species empathy, points directly to a single, incredibly potent hormone called oxytocin. This chemical is the biological glue that literally forces mammals to care for their vulnerable young regardless of the personal cost. When Binti saw the tiny, helpless shape of that child and sensed the profound distress in the environment, her ancient mammalian brain did not logically process him as a strange human intruder. The specific visual cues of a small, fragile infant triggered a massive flood of oxytocin that forcibly hijacked her nervous system, instantly flipping her from a potentially dangerous, territorial wild animal into a hyperprotective caregiver mode. Her internal biology simply miscategorized the human child as a member of her own species needing immediate maternal intervention. We desperately love to project complex human morality onto these animals, labeling them as knights in shining armor or compassionate guardian angels of the animal kingdom. The underlying reality is much more mechanical, though arguably just as fascinating, because that boy's survival had absolutely nothing to do with interspecies friendship. His life was saved by a million-year-old maternal algorithm experiencing a sudden, wildly fortunate biochemical glitch in its targeting system. But here is a layer of this whole phenomenon that honestly hurts to admit, especially if your internet feed is constantly flooded with heartwarming compilation videos of loyal dogs dragging their owners out of dangerous situations. We desperately want to view our golden retrievers and German shepherds as highly moral beings making conscious, heroic sacrifices. However, the reality involves a much more calculated, heavily manipulated process of genetic engineering. According to Dr. Brian Hare, the director of the Duke Canine Cognition Center, who published extensive findings in 2013, a dog risking its life for a human is the direct result of roughly 30,000 years of relentless coevolution. Dogs are the only species on the entire planet possessing a specific genetic mutation that allows them to accurately read human cortisol levels. They can interpret our facial expressions of despair and panic even better than our closest primate relatives can. When your dog pulls you away from a steep drop or alerts your family to a gas leak, it is not making an independent ethical judgment about the inherent value of human life. It is simply executing a literal job description that our human ancestors selectively bred into its DNA generation after generation. Protecting us has fundamentally become a biological imperative that is just as involuntary as sleeping or eating. Then we have to confront the massive psychological blind spot that completely skews our perception of these events. This is something researchers identify as a heavy mix of survivorship bias and rampant anthropomorphism. Animal behaviorist Clive Wynne pointed out in his 2004 research that we are culturally obsessed with projecting complex human virtues onto animals whenever they happen to do something beneficial for us. The digital algorithm heavily rewards and amplifies those incredibly rare instances where an animal intervenes to save a human life. Meanwhile, it conveniently ignores the thousands of daily incidents where animals simply walk away, mind their own business, or actively choose to attack. We remain hyper-focused on these statistical anomalies because they make us feel fundamentally special and cosmically connected to the natural world. We have effectively brainwashed ourselves into believing that the animal kingdom possesses a hidden, benevolent agenda toward our species, when the unsettling truth is just that we engineered one specific companion to care about our stress hormones while stubbornly ignoring the brutal indifference of absolutely everything else. When we step back and look at the broader picture, it becomes painfully clear how much we desperately want to be the main characters of the natural world. We want to believe that the animal kingdom recognizes our inherent value, that nature possesses a hidden moral compass pointing directly toward our survival. But evolution is profoundly indifferent to our human ego. These creatures are not operating out of some grand interspecies solidarity or conscious heroism. They are simply running their ancient, incredibly complex survival algorithms, reacting to environmental triggers and hormonal misfires that were perfected millions of years before we even existed. We are not the intended targets of their magnificent grace, or the chosen beneficiaries of their protective instincts. In the end, we are just remarkably fortunate bystanders, accidentally stumbling into the crosshairs of a biological safety net that was always meant for someone else.